Hi there. This is the third in a series of videos I'm making about the upcoming Aegon's Conquest prequel series to Game of Thrones. The third prequel series, we just got news that HBO has officially hired prominent movie screenwriter Mattson Tomlin to move the project forward. It's still in the pitch phase, but it's advanced from being an idea to a pitch. We're waiting for a green light. But in this video, I want to talk about the structure of it as a whole, and also what would or wouldn't be movies. That the big leak we got April of 2023 in Variety was that while this is a multi-season project, they kind of want to do the first part as a big theatrical movie to kick it off, which is a great idea. That if the whole series is about a combination of the Targaryen Conquest and the Sons of the Dragon era, through the reigns of his two sons ending with the death of Maegor the Cruel, that covers 50 years. So the running idea is that this would be like a 5-act structure. I made slides for this. Let me show you that. Act 1 is the actual War of Conquest. Act 2 is the First Dornish War, the later reign of Aegon. Act 3 is the reign of his older son, the weakling Aenys, all the little local uprisings culminating in the Faith Militant Uprising. Then Season 4 is the rise of Maegor, who crushes the Faith Militant but swings to the other extreme. He's a brutal tyrant. Then Season 5 is the fall of Maegor, ending with his death and the crowning of his 14-year-old nephew, Aegon's grandson, Jaehaerys, who then in House of the Dragon, if you're unfamiliar with this, remember House of the Dragon in the prologue to the first episode at the Great Council where you see that old man, the elderly king? That's Jaehaerys. They said he reigned for almost 60 years. So that would bookend this, that you'd have young teenage Jaehaerys at the very end of the Conquest show, and then you'd see him as an old man. We already saw him at the beginning of House of the Dragon. Now, the idea is, out of these 5 acts, they said, Season 1 might work better if we condense it to 3 hours and release it as a big-budget movie, which I think is a great idea. It lends itself very well to that. It's mostly action-oriented. It really isn't that long. Westeros.org itself has said it's more of a road trip thing than two sides fighting each other. Like House of the Dragon, it's easy to see there's Rhaenyra versus Alicent and their respective factions. Aegon's Conquest, it's like a road trip where they're fighting one of the different 7 kingdoms each time. It works better as a movie, I think. If you're going to pick one thing to do as a movie, it's a pretty obvious idea. This leaves us with 2 questions, which I'm just separating this out to give more focus to it. Would they do all of these as movies now? That in the second video in the series, I said that the success of Barbie and Oppenheimer has turned a lot of heads in Hollywood, and things that they were putting purely streaming, they're now turning back into movies. Case in point, Disney with Moana 2. Suddenly they said, that Moana TV series we were developing as a direct sequel, let's just re-edit that back into being a movie and release it as Moana 2. And they cited, and there's news articles on this, it's not my opinion, that specifically the success of Barbie and Oppenheimer, they convinced themselves that people weren't going to movies anymore. It's, no, you made bad movies. You watered down your brand, so we stopped going, and you blamed the audience. But they finally realized it's, no, people want movie content. They just want good movie content. So if HBO is on the fence about, should we do Season 1 as a movie instead, then follow it with 4 TV seasons? I think that's what tipped them over the side now, because Mattson Tomlin is a prominent movie screenwriter. I think that really indicates strongly now they're going to do it as a movie. However, this does raise the question, has this tipped the scale so much that they would now consider doing all 5 acts as movies? Would they do 1 on Aenys, 1 and 2 on Maegor for a 5-movie series? And I don't think that's a terrible idea, but I wouldn't. Because the story expands as they go. It's not as focused, there's not quite as much action. There's action in it. Maegor does burn things with his dragon, but as opposed to it's the War of Conquest, as a clear beginning and end, the First Dornish War, I think, would be Season 2. That doesn't really sustain a movie in and of itself, or the reign of Aenys. As a serialized movie, maybe. And if you're going to say, well, what about a TV movie? That destroys the point. The whole point was something in theaters, because theatrically released movies get a lot of publicity. I'm annoyed about this because there's so many good cult TV shows, but there's people who go, damn it, it's only real if it has a movie released in theaters, like a sci-fi fantasy franchise only counts if it has a movie, you know? But in their credit, theatrically released movies get a lot of publicity. It's not just about would this help or hurt the story of the Targaryen conquest through Maegor. They see having a big War of Conquest movie not just in terms of the amount of revenue it generates, ticket sales, but as this giant promotional event for the franchise as a whole. It's a decent idea. Well, you get the word. It's not just about the Targaryen conquest. It's to promote everything, to make it a really multi-platform thing, and I see that. But I think one movie is enough to achieve that. I don't think they need to make the rest as movies. It wouldn't really fit the format that well. On top of that, okay, once Aegon eventually dies and his first son comes to power, there wouldn't really need to be time skips on a huge scale. Like from when Aegon dies to when Maegor dies is 12 years. You wouldn't need to recast anyone. But season 2 with Aegon, old Aegon, First Dornish War, that's like 40 years. You would need to recast people eventually. It works better as a TV show. So the point is just, I still prefer if they do one movie followed by 4 TV seasons. It's a 5-act story. They might be considering 5 movies now. I hope they don't. But what do you guys think? I mean, if you're familiar with the source, I don't think it works like that. Oh, the other thing I'm tacking on here, because people ask, and I ask, it's a good question. What about doing the Jaehaerys chapters as linker material between Aegon's conquest and House of the Dragon, that he ruled for 60 years? I don't think that's enough to sustain a full TV show on its own. And there's maybe 2 seasons worth of material, because it's really 2 stories. When you read Fire and Blood, there's focused chapters on the 12 years after Maegor died, the aftermath of the Faith Militant Uprising when Jaehaerys was calming things down in the realm. And book ended with there's this big hard winter with a big plague in it, the Shivers. Then after that, there's one chapter that covers like the next 40 years going, and these were his relationships with his children. If you've only seen the TV show, remember episode 3 at the Royal Hunt, when Viserys is going, I can't even rule in my teenage daughter, and Lord Strong goes, Jaehaerys was driven near madness by his children, particularly his daughters. That's what they're talking about. I think there's enough material for like 1 TV season with a lot of time skips in it, because it starts when they're children and ends when he's an old man. Point is, I don't think that would be a standalone show, but we don't need to decide that now. I mean, I think what they do is, if Season 5 of Targaryen Conquest is still popular, if Season 5 is the death of Maegor, and people want to know what happened after that these characters were attached to, they might make a 6th and 7th season on, okay, this is what Jaehaerys did. Because there's chapters that they could adapt and would bridge the gap to House of the Dragon. Or they could do what Marvel does, where they, 6 of one, a dozen of the other. They could make a one-shot Jaehaerys season, or like what Loki did, where it was meant to be just 2 seasons. So whether they rename it as the Jaehaerys show or make it I think the better idea would be coast along in the success of the Conquest show, because they're not particularly strong chapters, but it's, if you were invested in this and want another 2 seasons, and it's still big if it's really popular by its 5th and final season, they might consider having another 2 seasons on the linker chapters about the relatively peaceful reign of Jaehaerys. I don't think those could ever be a movie, of course. But if they do 5 movies, they do that as like when Marvel has a limited run project, just to link them. But we don't need to worry about that now, because that's many years down the road. The Jaehaerys stuff. The bigger thing, the question we would ask Tomlin right away, but he's not doing questions, is, we've heard that you're doing the War of Conquest as a movie. That's true, right? And then, are you going to go through with the other story, like First Dornish War, The Sons of the Dragon, as TV seasons, or are they retooling them to be movies? Because I think they're too big to be movies, without as much action. So, in terms of the story structure of this, of movies versus TV seasons. Either way, I think they should do the Conquest itself as a theatrical movie, and that's what we're going to get first. So there'll be time to discuss this, of course, as it becomes public of what are you planning for Season 2, or Movie 2. And Jaehaerys will be like Season 6 or Season 1 of Jaehaerys' show made after Season 5. Same thing. That's what I think they'll do. Or what they should do. Now, this is not the final video in this series, so please follow me after the jump.